So guys, you remember a while back when Pete over at Cedric and Ada, this guy, he did the 5 knives that make you smile video, and then he tagged a bunch of us in it, and we did responses and tagged back to his video. Well, I decided, since I found some knives that I didn't have available at that time, that I would do a resurrection, because none of us have just 5 knives that make us smile. There's a story behind every knife. So Pete over at Cedric Ada, I'm going to kick this back to you to respond, and a few other people. So let's go ahead and look at my 5 more knives that make me smile. So this first knife that makes me smile is a knife that I went out of my way to get. This was about a 50-mile drive for me to go to a place called the Hillbilly Indian Shop in Zanesville, Ohio, at a shopping mall, to spend my hard-earned lawn mowing money on a Frost cutlery boot knife that I paid way more than I should have. This thing is horrible. It's got the frost wood, as you'd expect. You can see it's glued on. It's got this skull cracker. It's not even on. And if you look, the handle is on it crooked. Like, this is not even straight. It's got a bow to it in hand. This was their ace of spades. It's done. It's just plain surgical steel. I lusted after this. We would go to that shopping mall, Colonial Square Mall in Zanesville, Ohio, and I saved and saved, and I went the one time with my mother and father. We went down there, and my dad was going to the big sporting goods store down there, and I went to the Hillbilly Indian Shop, and I bought this without them knowing it, and put it in my boot and carried it around the mall to sneak it home, because my dad was a cop. I was absolutely not allowed to have things like this. And this makes me smile every time, because I think back at how happy I was with myself when I bought this, with unbeknownst to my parents. And they didn't even, like, I was like 14 years old, and they didn't try and stop me at the store. You can see how off ground this is. It just makes me giggle and smile every time. And I remember when my dad found this, how upset he was. He's like, "Which one of your friends got this for you?" And I had to tell him the whole story of us going to the mall and me sneaking this behind their back. And I had this in the back of my pants. I was concealed carrying a dagger. At the time, this would have been 100% illegal in Ohio. I don't know how it is now. But I had this in the small of my back for the entire rest of the day while we were walking around the shopping mall, eating at the food court, and having a day with my mother, my father, and my sister and I. And so just makes me giggle and smile every time I see it. I would never get rid of this. It's something I'll keep forever, just because it's that goofy. This knife is the polar opposite of that, but it makes me smile for a completely different reason. This was the first, like, really nice gift to the channel from one of the, this came from Zachary Schmidt. He sent me this knife, and it completely encapsulates everything I love about good fixed blade knives. This is the Bark River North Country EDC 2. This was the first production run, and this was done in an insane combination of stuff that makes it over the top enough to be something I would love, but still functional enough for me to love it. These things are great. Bark River knives are great, but this is just something that was sent, unsolicited, from one of the subscribers. It's done in, this is ruby red dragon scale with mosaic pins, and it has a cherry red liner, and it's an S45 VN. But the fact that every time I play, I don't use this knife. This would be one of the few that I would say I'd consider a safe queen. I use it for some things, but not a lot. This thing absolutely makes me giggle every time I see how over the top it is, but yet functional. This bridges that gap. It's awesome. It was a very, very thoughtful gift from one of my subscribers, and it is a super high quality knife. This, like I said, I'd gotten a bunch of gifts to the channel before, but this was the one that really stood out. This was the first one that absolutely was something like really high end that had come in from a subscriber that appreciated the content. And that makes me smile. That lets me know that I'm doing things that people enjoy when they're willing to do stuff like this. I would never part with this. The guy told me, he's like, "You can't ever get rid of it." And I was like, I would absolutely never get rid of a gift, first of all. But this thing is just amazing, and it just makes me smile to even hold it. It looks like something out of a movie. It looks like something that, like, Thor or one of the other Norse gods would carry, with like this special, like, material that they'd gotten off of a dragon. So, second knife that makes me smile, a gift from a subscriber. This is the first of two of these knives that are on this list because they have a direct association with my father. This was the first knife that my father ever let me use to help butcher. Now, we had been butchering deer, and I killed and butchered two of my own deer, and I notched this myself. But this is just an old Ontario Knives, old hickory butcher knife that my father kept in the butchery kit. He made a sheath for it. We would keep it in the box where we would do for butchering deer and pigs and stuff on the farm. But this thing takes me back to being in the basement on my grandparents' farm after deer season, and we were all butchering the deer that we had got during deer season. And this thing has been kicking around the family for a good 40 years. It is nothing special, but it's something we would never part with. It, as you can see, it is in rough condition and it has been through the mill. You can see that there's rust. This thing, I would never think about rehandling this. But I have to say, it's still a very, very good kitchen knife. I just sharpened it. I used it not too long ago. This thing is absolutely something that came to me from my father, from his father-in-law, that has been around forever. And it's just got a little bit of history. Like I said, I cut those notches in the first two deer that I absolutely got on my own and then butchered those deer with this knife. Those are on there. It just takes me back to being home, a homesick kind of thing. My father passed here a few years ago, and it's just a direct connection. And I absolutely love having it here at the house. I don't use it for much. Every once in a while, I'll drag it out just for fun, but it makes me smile that I have this connection to both my grandfather and my father. Something just so simple here. My father even made this sheath for it so that he could throw it in the butchery box when we would go places to butcher. Like if we had been hunting and we butchered at someone else's house, it was able to be thrown in there. You didn't have to worry about dinging up the edge. So there you go. This old hickory done by Ontario. It's just a piece of family history that I love having here. This knife is my Higo no Kami. Now, I got this in Japan. I had went back to visit my in-laws. I was there for about a month. This makes me smile because this was one of the best trips back to Japan that I got to make. It was the last one I got to make here in recent history. And I got to go around with my father-in-law and my wife to go find these. And my father-in-law was joking. I told him I wanted to get some of these as souvenirs for friends. Now I've sharpened mine and everything, but he was laughing. He goes, go look in the shed. There's probably like 15 of those. I use them for sharpening pencils and things like that. But it's just a very simple, very, very simple little knife that they sell in Japan. They're available at hardware stores. I brought back a bunch of these. It's not the knife so much that makes me smile. It's the fun we had on that trip that I associate with this. And I would never get rid of this. I love my in-laws. I love going, and it's just a little thing. And you're not going to be able to get these for too much longer. There's only one guy that makes these. You can get the Higo style, but you can't get these actual Higos as often because there's only one guy that was part of the Higo no Kami Knife Makers Guild. There's only one guy left. He doesn't have an apprentice. He's really old. He's like 80 or 90 years old. He still makes like 50 of these a day, but he's slowing down. And so when he stops making these, you're not going to be able to get something that's called an actual Higo no Kami. They're going to be named as something as a Higo style. So that was one of the best trips I ever had. I made a playlist. I'll link the playlist down below of that trip to Japan. I made like 5 videos, and you guys can see the correlation, how much fun I have when I get to spend time with my in-laws. And this kind of just takes me back to that awesome, awesome trip that we did that summer for the Obon Festival, or the Festival of the Dead. So it makes me smile every time I see this thing in my collection. I have several other knives that remind me of spending time with my in-laws, but this one is the one that really stands out. And this last knife doesn't just make me smile. This knife is an amazing piece of my personal history and my journey into the knife hobby. This was the first knife I was ever given, and it didn't make it into the first 5 knives that make me smile because it had come up missing at the time, and I was just inconsolable about how upset I was. This knife my father gave me when I was about 6 years old. I have had this knife for about 43 years, and it's a simple little Camelus number 42 silver sword. But it was a birthday gift from my father so that I had a small little knife for skinning squirrels. You can see this has been sharpened down so far. It is still ridiculously sharp, but it's just a simple, cheap little knife that has had so much carry. And it was a gift from my father. He went as far as to engraved my initials in it in his own handwriting. And if you're ever to see one of my knife designs and see my maker's mark, that is exactly what you're going to see. As a matter of fact, hang on just a second. As you can see, that's absolutely my father's handwriting on my knife design. This is what started my incredible journey into carrying knives and having knives. And it's just an amazing thing that I've been able to keep this over those years, so many years, that I've had this knife that rode in my pocket. I carried it across 16% of the countries in the world. I carried it on deployments to the Middle East. I carried it on deployments to Europe. I carried this on ships, and it's always been just a little reminder of home that I carried with me. And to still be able to have that, it makes it the most important item in my knife collection. And it makes me smile. Every time I pull this thing out and clean it up, it just makes me smile to remember the thoughtful gift of my father that I am going to pass down to my daughter, to be passed down to my grandchildren when that time comes. And it's amazing. And it's one of those things that reminds us why knife collectors are knife collectors. What makes knives so important to us? It's not the knife itself. A lot of times it's a simple connection to it that reminds us of something else. Some people collect pins and things like that that remind them of specific times in their life. I collect knives. And I will always collect knives, and I will always keep this near and dear to my heart. So there you go. 5 more knives that make me smile. Let's turn this around. I'm going to shout out a couple of other channels that are going to be tagged in this so that they can show us 5 more knives that make them smile. So for a lot of us guys that collect knives, most people don't understand that there's a story behind every knife that we have that is very important to us. It doesn't have to be a valuable knife for it to be incredibly important to us. And I love the format of this. Pete did it. It brought out a lot of things that I'm like, what knives are that important to me that make me smile, that might not have any real monetary value? That Higo no Kami is basically worthless. That Frost cutlery is less than worthless. The little folding knife that my father gave me is like a $10 knife, but they all are the most valuable knives in my collection, not because of monetary value, but because they represent a specific time in our lives. And you'll find a lot of knife guys are like that. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down, but tell me why. Please go check out Lefty, Jared over at Lefty EDC, Jared over at Neves Knives, Pete over at Cedric and Ada, Jim Skelton, Nick over at Stasa, and Zach. I'm tagging all those people in it. I want to see their more knives that make them smile. I'm not going to do the whole big thing. You guys know that there's a bunch of ways you can support the channel. They're all in the description below. That's it on this one. I love you all. I really do. And I appreciate everything you've done for the channel. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. And I'll see you in the next video.